My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I'm going to answer the question, is being emotional the same thing as emotional intelligence? So for today's show, there's going to be three parts. The first part, I want to tell you why I think this subject is important. So that's number one. Number two, I want to talk about some of the aspects of emotional intelligence. And on the third part, I want to compare what emotional intelligence is compared to many of the symptoms that I'm seeing out there in the world. And I want to compare the two. Because a lot of times, what's trying to be passed off as emotional intelligence is really nothing more than just being emotional. So let me start off with the first part of why I wanted to do this show. This show just kind of came to me. I was on the elliptical machine at the gym, and they had the big screen on. There was no sound, but I could read the thing at the bottom there. And they had the news on, which is something I try not to do too much. I don't really want to watch the news. I don't find it to be uplifting in any way. But one of the things that was very interesting to me is because they were talking about the political atmosphere. And they said that a certain political candidate, or actually all of them, when they're trying to win, they're going to try to ramp up their attacks on their political adversaries. And I thought this was really interesting because what you're not seeing is somebody who's talking about their resume, about why they should have that lofty job. You want to be the leader of the free world, you should have a resume. That's number one. Number two, you should probably have a very detailed idea of how you want to help the American people. And I'm not seeing that with any of these candidates. All they do is try to do put downs and make jokes and make fun of, and again, ramp up the negativity or try to find dirt or bad material on somebody else and just say it. And I thought, well, that has no emotional intelligence whatsoever. It's just showing a lack of morals and a lack of decency. But here's the real problem. It works. Why? Because most of the voting public feels the same way, and it works. So therefore, the candidates are mirroring the people in the United States. So I find that to be a real major problem. So I thought this was something to talk about today. Also, the other thing I notice is on social media, there's been this real push towards emotional intelligence. Everybody thinks they're a therapist now. Everybody likes to talk in therapy language. They like to throw around the words like trauma and PTSD, narcissism. And so supposedly we're all so much more emotionally intelligent now. But the interesting thing about that is that there's been an increase in neuroticism, an increase in emotional dysregulation, an increase in narcissism, an increase in a extroversion, which is a personality trait, so there's nothing technically wrong with that. Except what I'm seeing is that people are wanting to get attention. And they're doing this by being disruptive to people, by showing less empathy, by being angry, combative. They're doing it by being neurotic. So again, we're talking about emotional intelligence on the one hand, and then on the other hand, we're not showing any of it at all, and we're actually, as a society, becoming less and less emotionally intelligent. And you could look at all the numbers, empirically speaking, there's been an increase in depression, an increase in anxiety, an increase in suicidal ideations, increase in suicides. We're seeing an increase in mood disorders, personality disorders. It's all over the place. And yet, we're trying to pass it off as we've become emotionally intelligent. It doesn't make any sense. So let's take it from the top, emotional intelligence. I'm not going to spend too much time on most of these because, like I said, I wrote this really quick. I think I wrote out 17 reasons why I don't think people are emotionally intelligent right now and how they're showing it. And I did this while I was on the elliptical, and I think I did it in about 12 minutes. So that's how fast and how easy it actually is, that it's just so plain and obvious. So let's go over what emotional intelligence actually is. And we can call it equanimity, which means calmness, having composure, and an evenness of temper, especially in stressful and difficult situations. Are we seeing this in the real world? Are we seeing it with our politicians? Are we seeing it in the voting public who's actually voting for people like this? I would say no to all of that. In order to have emotional intelligence, you want to have self-awareness. You want to know why you feel the way you do. You have to be able to identify your own emotions, be able to recognize them. But you also have to be able to recognize other people's emotions and actually care about them. Now, you want to be able to experience your emotions. That would be normal. We don't want to go into the situation like I talked about last week, alexithymia, where you can't even identify your emotions. And if you have them, you need to repress and stuff them down totally. I'm not saying that. You want to be able to experience your emotions, but you want to add rational thought to that. And then what that will equal is a skillful or productive behavior. That is emotional intelligence. You also want to get your emotions and your feelings in agreement with nature and fate. What does that mean? It can mean a lot of things. The first thing that comes to my head when I think about getting your feelings and emotions in line with nature is that nature has its seasons. Things are born, and then they go into this prime phase, and then they start to decline, they get old, and then things die. If you have a problem with this and you want to complain about it and you want to have over emotionality about it, you're never going to win, because this is just the nature of things. You can't go against nature. In capitalism, it's like that too. We have planned obsolescence. I'm like this all the time. I'm trying to watch a football game today, and it's hard to watch. I love football. Football was a very tough sport, with a team sport. And now you see these playoff games, and they're saying it's this quarterback against that quarterback. And the reason for that is because all the rules have been so watered down, so these players barely hit anymore. It's almost like scripted ballet, that it really comes down to one major player on each team and if they can win it that way. And as an older guy that's actually saw real competitive sports, this is hard to watch. But of course, as time goes on, there's younger generations, and they can look at somebody like me and say, well, you're going against nature. Planned obsolescence. The game has changed. Either you enjoy what we have now, or be angry and annoyed every time there's a football game on. So again, am I showing a level of emotional intelligence by being annoyed every time I watch football because it's not real football anymore? No, it's not. So I'm not saying I'm above it. I'm definitely not. So you do have to have your emotions and feelings in accord with nature. Continuing, you want to be able to manage your emotions in a logical, reasonable, and rational way. In other words, you want to be able to respond without reacting. You want to be able to control your responses to events, because you can't control the event itself most of the time. And you have to know the difference. If it's an event that you have no control over, well, then you have to manage how you feel about it. It doesn't help to always be in your emotions with things that you can't change in any way. That's only going to lead you down one road. Actually, it's going to make you sad, it's going to make you annoyed, it's going to make you depressed, these types of things. And continuing with emotional intelligence, real quick, you want to add a couple of these words to you. You want to be conscious, you want to have compassion, and you want to be connected. In other words, I'll see a lot of people who are trying to think that they are emotionally intelligent, but really they're just emotional. Do these people understand how their emotions affect others? Do you have empathy? Or when you talk about feelings and emotions, is it only about yours? Because that's not being emotionally intelligent. You can call people narcissists, but if it's only your feelings and emotions that matter and other people's don't, hate to point the finger back at you, but that's actually more narcissistic. In other words, you need to be empathetic towards other people. Again, not hypervigilant. Some people confuse this. When other people talk, they're screening them for words to be offended by. And they go, oh, that's terrible. I'm so emotional now about what you said. No, again, that's very narcissistic and it's hypervigilant. That's not being empathetic towards other people seeing the world differently than you. And also with connectedness, you want to be able to get along with people. right? So again, that's definitely part of emotional intelligence. I'm not really seeing that. I'm seeing a lot of combative people. I'm seeing people that win or, you know, gain friends or lose friends or ditch friends or just decide that somebody's not their friend anymore, just based off of a point of view that they might have. Listen, this is brand new. This is relatively new type of psychology that I'm seeing, let's say in the last 10 to 15 years, pushed by social media. Again, we're saying that we're emotionally intelligent, but we're actually proving that we're more emotional and we're acting more and more infantile by the day. So let me see if I could bring this up. Hopefully I didn't repeat these things too many times. Again, I was on the elliptical and I was trying to type while I was doing this. But I think I came up with about 17 different ways to show that somebody's being emotional and they're not actually showing emotional intelligence. So I put number one, acting only on your emotions and not on facts is infantile. I was working out at the time, so I used the word infantile. Let me change it so I don't hurt anybody's feelings. Acting on emotions without facts is unskillful and unproductive. Let's say that. Second one, believing your emotions are the only ones that matter is very unskillful and immature. Next one, emotional dysregulation is infantile. Believing that neuroticism is emotional intelligence is also infantile. Again, what I'm seeing more and more is that people think because they're showing their emotions a lot, but they're not actually based off of anything, or they actually are based off of something, but they're the only feelings that matter. Somebody else's perceptions don't matter. Again, this is extremely infantile and it closes off conversations. And in going along with that, the next one, expecting others to change their opinions is infantile. Or not participating in a conversation because you need them to be a slave to your own pontificating. In other words, again, you're the only one in this conversation and they can't have a point of view, and if you do, you get offended, and that becomes you being more emotional, therefore having more emotional intelligence. That doesn't make any sense. An emotionally intelligent person could listen to somebody else's point of view, know that they have had a different life, and therefore their perceptions are going to be different than yours, and you can take that into account. And you can either agree with it or not agree with it. But then again, if you don't agree with it, maybe you could agree with it because if you had the life that that person had, or maybe you had the values that that person had, that those things work for them. Just because it doesn't work for you doesn't mean it doesn't work. Needing people to validate you is infantile. I hear this a lot. I need this person to validate me. First of all, self-validation is the most important. If you live life needing the validation from the world and other people, you're not going to have a good life, because that means your happiness is actually put in the hands of everybody else around you. Now, to soften this up a little bit, I would say if you're in a very important relationship that you have, maybe it's your partner, your husband, your wife, something like this, yeah, I would expect a partner to validate another partner. That does make sense. But expecting everybody in the world to validate you all the time, making you seen and heard, it sounds nice. It would be nice. But you can't expect it from other people. And again, it puts the power in other people's hands. So that means they own you and they control you. It's not a good way to go. It's not emotionally intelligent. Again, a little bit repetitive because I was exercising when I wrote this down, but needing people to agree with you is infantile. Again, growing up, I had plenty of friends that I disagreed with on a lot of subjects all the time. It did never in any way got in the way of a friendship. I don't know why I'm seeing it now, but I notice other people in other generations, they could be 12 years old and they seem to be more emotionally intelligent and mature than I see people in their 30s and 40s in this time. Next one, if you're not acting at least partly instinctively or with common sense, you are infantile. Let me explain that one, because that one sounds a little bit off for most people, I'm sure. Let me say it like this. I have clients, and I have had clients throughout my career, that let's say they live in a residence, and I mean residence because it could be a house. A lot of times it's not. Sometimes it's a shack. Sometimes it's a trailer, whatever. Sometimes it's an abandoned bus or a car, even. And with all of this, I will see what they are motivated to do. I will ask them, what can you do? What would you like to do? What are you willing to do to change your circumstances? Most of the time, the answer I get is nothing. And I'll say, well, civilization is only about a mile away. Have you considered walking down the street and getting a job? And typically the answer is no. I don't like people. I don't want to associate with people. I don't want to be around them. They're the problem in my life. So there's some emotional intelligence, not intelligent thoughts for you, is that it's everybody else out in the world that causes all your problems. That's not true. It's not true at all. And the worrisome thing here is that you can have a person living in a residence with no power, no running water, and they still don't have the motivation to get up and get a job to help themselves. Now, somebody could easily say, well, this person's depressed, and therefore that's why they don't want to do something like this. But if you suggest or hint or ask or encourage in any way this person should actually get up and do something for themselves, they will fight you tooth and nail. They will come up with every single excuse not to do something for themselves. They will yell, they will scream, they will throw their arms. There's no depression going on here. And yes, I'm well aware that some people use the term, like they'll say, well, especially men, if they're depressed, they use anger as a way to cope. Yeah, I can see part of that. But here's the thing, a part of being depressed means that it's a shrinkage, right? And so if that's true, you're shrinking away from society. Why is it that they'll fight to the death to maintain the lifestyle that they actually want? Again, not everybody, but again, we're seeing this. So what does this have to do with common sense and instinct? Let me put it like this. A hungry lion will always hunt. That's instinct. Now, if there's a lion out in the wild, and let's say he's 3 years old, he's somewhat in his prime, he doesn't say to himself, my mane really is not the correct color. My mane is not fluffy as some of the other male lions. And I got made fun of when I was a cub. And because I was made fun of as a cub, now I have to hold that shame with me the rest of my life. And now I'm just going to sit here on the savannah and starve myself to death. No animal would do that. No animal. There's a poem by D.H. Lawrence. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but let me give it a shot. He says something to the effect of, I never saw a wild thing feel sorry for itself. A small bird can drop frozen dead off of a branch without ever feeling sorry for itself. Why is this? I don't really know the answer to it, but it just seems like a lot of human beings lose the instinct, lose the common sense to basically live for whatever reason it is. They think somebody's going to end up taking care of them. And again, is this emotionally intelligent? No, it's infantile. It doesn't make sense. Let's continue with that. Complaining about things you can't control is unskillful. Not doing things that you can control is also infantile behavior. So again, what can you control in this world? If you decide not to do anything that you can actually control, how is that being emotionally intelligent? It's not. Again, these people tend to be too much in their feelings. I feel sad, I feel this, I feel guilty, I feel. How about you feel hungry and then you go out and do something? Like that would be more important. And again, if this doesn't sound empathetic to somebody, understand what empathy and nurturing actually means. Because nurturing somebody means you're supporting their growth as a person. So if you enable somebody and you don't actually put them in the right direction to do something for themselves so they can have a better life, that's not empathy. That's not nurturing. You're actually helping to destroy this person. So that doesn't make sense to me. Acting off of automatic thoughts is infantile. Again, we see this a lot too in psychology now. I'll see this with a lot of therapists because they're afraid to confront their clients. Somebody will have an automatic thought or a feeling, and we validate it. Why? And I hear this so much. It's because perception equals reality. Does it? Because, okay, in the individual person, if they perceive something as being true, it is, because the feeling is correct. They have that feeling and they perceive it and it is true to them. But does it mean it's really true in the real world? No, it does not. Just because you perceive something as being true doesn't mean it's true. They need to be challenged. It very well could be delusional. Albert Ellis, again, a very famous therapist back in the 50s, he would say, it's not my job to make you feel better. It's my job to make you do better. But the problem with this, as you put it in the year 2024, if you don't make people feel better because they're in their feelings and emotions, they probably won't see you anymore. They'll probably find somebody else. And so if you try to make them do better by correcting their irrational thoughts, by correcting their automatic thoughts, there's a pretty good chance you're going to lose that client. And so a lot of therapists just sit back, they wait for the money to come in, they just keep yesing the client to death, they validate them as much as they can, but they don't move them to a state or to an empowerment strategy. And that's where the problem is, as far as I can see it. So we have a society and people acting in a very immature, unproductive, unskillful way with no emotional intelligence whatsoever. And we have therapists who are supposed to be the leaders here, and they are also teaching and encouraging people to not have emotional intelligence. And continuing with that, telling someone that everything is fine when it's not is not nurturing and emotionally intelligent. It's delusional and it infantilizes the client or the individual. I think I went over that a little bit. Always blaming other people for your problems is incredibly unskillful and unproductive, and definitely not emotionally intelligent. Always expecting your partner to make you happy. Definitely not productive. Being jealous all the time. Again, that's an emotion that we have because we don't feel good about ourselves. So therefore, instead of trying to control ourselves, we try to control the environment instead, which of course we can't do. So in other words, if somebody is beautiful out in the world and you don't want your partner to see that, again, you're going against nature, right? There's always something more beautiful out there. There's always something. And even if something was more beautiful or not more beautiful, it doesn't matter because everybody has their own point of view on what is and what's not. And so it doesn't make sense. You're not following nature in that sense if you're going to try to make somebody look away because something over there might be beautiful. The best way to do it is to have, again, equanimity, not carry the way. Go around the world and say, I'm going to do the best I can to be as healthy and to look as vibrant as I can. And by the way, there's plenty of other people in the world doing the same thing. And therefore, my partner is alive, they're not dead, and they're going to have this thought sometimes that they want to see something beautiful, and they're going to look at that person. That's normal. If you go against that, you're going to have some real problems that you can never fix. Acting as though you're offended as a way to manipulate other people is also infantile. Again, I think that's pretty evident there. We're seeing this more and more. Act like the victim, act like you're just going to cry all the time and you're offended and you're going to blame the other person for saying what they said. So you are going to try to be the police to stop them from talking in a certain way. So who's the tyrant here? Right? It would be the person who's acting like a victim. That's who the actual tyrant is. And again, it's emotional, yes, but nothing close to being emotionally intelligent. So the show's long again. I was going to try to cut it short, but of course I can never do that. Again, let me finish with this. If I'm going to say one thing today, it's this. Please understand the difference between someone, or maybe it's yourself, of being an emotional person compared to having emotional intelligence. Emotionally intelligent people are aware of their feelings, but handle them in a correct way. And they handle their emotions and feelings in line with fate and with nature. Hopefully this has been beneficial to you. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.